Hey everyone, welcome to the Coder's Couch podcast, where you're invited into the crazy life and thoughts of Jason. That's me, so that I can tell you a little bit about what's going on in my life as I enter this new, exciting season. In this episode, I'll be talking about my experience with the grad school application process, my first group interview, and some of the challenges I faced along the way. Speaking of challenges, I want to apologize for the delay in releasing this episode. My wife and I just moved as part of my transition to grad school, so we've been too busy with packing, moving, and unpacking to record, edit, and release a podcast episode. But here we are, I'm back, and I'm so glad you've decided to join me. Here's the episode. Hey, we're back for a second episode of the Coder's Couch podcast. Man, I am so excited to be recording this second episode. So I am recording this even before I release the first episode out into the wild. And there are a couple friends and family members that I've told about this project of mine, this experiment. You guys have just expressed so much interest and excitement in listening to my podcast, even though you guys don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. That means so much to me. Yeah, I figured I just want to get rolling on another episode so that we can keep this going. So, something I mentioned in the first episode was the application process of how I applied to grad school. And I think that's a funny story, or at least it's pretty amusing to me. So I just wanted to dive in and unpack that. If you guys have never heard of or experienced a group interview, then maybe this can shed some light on one experience of, I'm sure, many. I'm sure there are many different ways to do group interviews. And so this could be kind of cool just for listening. So let's start with probably the thought process that my wife and I went through in order to decide that I was going to apply for grad school. So she and I had already been talking for probably a couple weeks, I think, about my job transition. And she knew that I wasn't passionate about my work and that I would be looking for something else. And I think it kind of came up as we were processing our priorities, which I mentioned in the first episode about we originally wanted to pay off student loans and then I would go to grad school. My wife and I were talking about it for a little while. And then we went to her grandparents' house for Easter. It's about a 3.5 hour drive or so. And so we went there for Easter, spent time with the family. And then on our drive back, actually, the idea sparked right toward the end of that drive when we had stopped for supper. So we got into the restaurant and I got some text messages from a group chat that I have with two of my friends. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it was something to do with expenses and priorities. One of them made a joke, and then I was in the middle of responding about paying off our student loans and then doing something else. That is when the idea crossed my mind, wait a minute, could we do both? Could I apply and then do something like online graduate school? So that crazy idea popped into my head. And I told my wife and I said, I'm going to take a look at our budget when we get back home. And in the next day or two, I will flesh this out and just think about, would it be possible? Could we put me through online grad school while I work and while she works and while we've got our full-time job income, and then in the evenings I take these classes from an online school. And so she was very supportive of that. She thought that sounded like a good idea, a good way to make sure that our bills were covered, because that's the priority, along with sending me through school, because she knew how much this had been bothering me, that I didn't have the job satisfaction that I used to. So we looked into that together, and that was Easter weekend, so that would have been March 31st. On Monday, April 1st, I was looking at the deadlines for these different schools that I was looking at, 2 state schools and 2 online schools. I was looking at these 4 schools thinking the best option would probably be to keep working and then to attend school at the same time. And that way we can maintain our income, we could cover all our bills. It would just lead to the most stable transition as I go through school. And so for the online schools, the deadlines were roughly like a month away. So plenty of time to apply, to fill out the application, to answer any essay questions, and to get any letters of recommendation that I needed. For one of the state schools, the deadline was, I think, maybe a month away also, or maybe half a month away, like 2 weeks or so away. And so that one was a little bit more of a time crunch, but that state school was not the one that I wanted to attend out of the two options I had out of the two state schools, because the other one had a specialization in marriage and family therapy along with their mental health counseling degree. And that's the direction I wanted to head in. I'm sure either degree is great, but I feel like I would be missing out on some valuable education if I didn't have some kind of marriage and family specialization or classes. And so I wanted to go to one state school over the other, but both of them were good options for the cost and for the distance from where we lived. And so the deadline for the state school that I wanted to go to was that day, was April 1st. Now, I didn't know if that meant like my application had to be in yesterday at the latest, or if I could somehow rush an application today and have it be accepted. While I was working that day, I sent a message to my career coach, and we have career coaches at my company in charge of just coming alongside of you. They'll ask questions about your goals and what you're facing at work, where you want to go in your role, in your career, and they'll help bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to go by identifying the next checkpoints along the way, and like, hey, what milestones do you have to hit, and what achievements or trainings might you need to take in order to get where you want to go. Because our company is really, really good at mobility within the company, be that upwards mobility into some leadership positions, or lateral mobility if you want to explore a completely different role. And so my career coach has been probably my biggest advocate within the company. He's not focused on just me as an employee, which I really appreciate. And I don't think that anybody at our company is. Everybody has been so focused on the employees as people, which is really, really nice. It's really nice to have a company culture where they care about you as a person, not just as a number in a system, or the saying goes like a cog in the machine. And so my career coach, he knew that I wanted to pursue therapy instead of software development. And so when I told him about this, he's somebody that I can be really open and honest with. So when I told him about this program and I said, hey, the deadline is today, I don't think I'm going to make that. He said, what are the chances that you can rush an application today, get all the requirements you need, and then submit it and just try your best to get your hat in the ring? And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, why not? Like, full send. I'm just gonna try it. So that's what I did, and I spent my lunch hour writing my personal statement about why you wanted to be a therapist, what you wanted to specialize in, what experiences have prepared you to take this step. And basically what they're looking for is the reason why you will succeed in grad school, why you would be a successful student, because nobody wants you to enter grad school and fail. I mean, that's just not good for anybody. That's not good for the student, and that's not good for the faculty and staff. They want you to come in with the best chance of success, and part of that starts with choosing the candidates that are likely to be the most successful. And so I spent my lunch hour writing my personal statement. Fortunately, my wife was an English major in college, and she has edited like a bajillion papers. So she was able to look over my paper and edit it a couple times, and then I'd tweak things, and then I'd ask her for another round of feedback. And so with that, we were able to write something that sounded genuine and polished, at least. I can't say it sounded good, but it sounded polished and offered a clear explanation of my heart for people, my heart for therapy, my heart for sitting across from somebody and walking with them through hard things. And so I submitted that. And then I also needed I think it was two letters of recommendation. So I asked my career coach. He said, if you need a letter of recommendation today, I will do my best to rush one out. And so then I reached out to my counselor and I asked her for a letter of recommendation. God bless my counselor because she was on family vacation when I emailed her, and she was still willing to rush a letter of recommendation for me. I am so grateful to my life coach and to my counselor because they are lifesavers. They've made this entire thing possible, and it was their sacrifice on that Monday morning that helped me get here, that helped open the door to this next season of life that I'm entering. And it's awesome. Can't say thank you enough to those guys. So, filled out everything, gathered all the stuff, hit the submit button, and then got an email saying, "Hey, we've received your application. We will let you know what the next steps are." And so um, something was still bothering me about the deadline. Did I miss the boat by one day? Especially after all this hard work, that would have been very frustrating. At that point, I would have applied to a different school, I'm sure. But I called the school, and then I got their answering machine because they were still on Easter break. And so, I had to wait another day, and of course, for a lot of the rest of the day, my mind was just spinning because I was excited. I was speechless. I was like, "I can't believe that we got in all of the application materials in one day." Like, I had been thinking about applying and going to grad school for therapy for at least, well, I mean, I decided to apply the day before. I decided I wanted to make that happen. But I had been wanting to, and I knew that this was something that would be on my radar. I knew that for about a week. But really, I kind of applied just on a whim. Let's say it was like 9 a.m. on Monday morning or 9 a.m. one morning that I was like, all right, I'm going to apply. And then by whatever it was, by, 3 p.m. that day, then I was done with all my part in this application process, or at least for this step of the application process. Like, that's crazy. That's nuts. And so I just had to wait. I had to wait another day to call and ask if I had missed the boat by one day or if I had gotten everything in on time. So I wait another day. Next day comes. I think it was 8:30 or 9 o'clock, some reasonable time where I figured the department would be open, people would be back in offices. Like 9 a.m. rolls around the next day, that Tuesday, and I call and somebody actually picks up, and I'm like, "Oh, holy crap, a real human." Somebody picks up and it's the department administrative assistant. And so I said, "Hey, my name's Jason, and I applied for the counseling program for this master's program yesterday, but I noticed that the website said the deadline was it's April 1st, and I just wanted to double check. Did I get everything in on time, or did I miss it by one day?" And she said, "Let me double check that we have all your materials. I will check on this on our side. I will check the forms that you submitted. I'll see if we have all of your letters of recommendation, and then I'll call you back and I'll let you know." And so I said, "Okay, thank you." Then later on, I think, again, let's say that was 9 a.m. By I think like 1 p.m., she called back and said, "Hey, good news. We got everything. So you are done with that part. You're good to go. And within another week or so, our faculty and staff will review the applications, and you should hear back about interviews in a week or so." And so I was like, probably hyperventilating. I know that I was in the office that day. I got up from my desk, I shot over to my coworker's desk, and I was like, "Dude, holy crap, I'm in the running. Like, I actually submitted everything, and they're gonna look at it, and then they'll let me know." And so I got to celebrate with some of my coworkers, the ones who knew about this transition at least, because I didn't, I hadn't told everybody, and there's at that point there's not really anything to tell. If I couldn't get into grad school, then I wouldn't be leaving, or if I got into an online school and I planned to keep working, then it's not like I was leaving at that point anyway, and I didn't want to put any concern in anybody's mind when it wasn't justified or when there was nothing to be concerned about. So I told this coworker, we celebrated together. He said, "That's awesome. congratulations. I hope that goes well. Obviously, he said it with more enthusiasm than what I just said. I'm a little out of breath. If we fast forward about a week, I get an email. Let me pull up the email on my phone and we'll take a look. So, April 1st, I send in this application. April 9th, according to this email, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but it said, "Congratulations, your application has passed the initial screening, and we are excited to invite you to our large group screening on April 18th. If you're unable to attend, then we have a Zoom option." And then in the afternoon, they said same day, Thursday, April 18th, that there would be a graduate assistantship fair, which I talked about in the first episode, that I applied for all these graduate assistantship positions just in hopes that I could get one of them. And then hopefully I would have my tuition paid for by the school because I would be working for the school. And so that fair was then that afternoon. So that's about 2 weeks later, a week and a half, about a week and a half later then is my day. I get up early, I get ready, I do all the things. I get up, I journal, I spend time reading my Bible, make sure that I have a healthy morning, make my coffee, make my breakfast, like all the things I'm not going to skip out on the things that I need in order to do my best, to show up, to look my best, to do my best, to feel the best about everything. And so I drive to the campus, so about an hour, and I get on campus. This is my first time being on this college campus specifically. I had never been there, had never seen any photos really. So this was like, I just looked up a campus map. And according to the details that were given me in the email that I had received, I did my best to look up where I was going. And I got there early. I think I got there like 20 to 30 minutes early. I just like to be early. And I figured I would give myself plenty of time to not be late. You know, if I get there and I have no idea where I'm going and I have to walk around and ask people for directions, like, hey, how do I get to this building? Then I would have time to do that because I didn't want to be late. This was something I couldn't be late for. So I get there early. I got there even before the administrative assistant and one of the professors started setting up. I sat down there in like the building lobby area with, you know, the classrooms just like down the hall. And I sat there. I always carry around this little notebook. I guess I don't really have a formal name for it. A good one might be day journal. It's just a notebook for any notes. If I think of something, hey, I got to do this when I get home, I'll make a to do in my notebook. If somebody says, hey, I'm doing this at this time, then I'll write that down so that I don't forget, so that I can talk to my wife about it later. Or I will write some things down, maybe how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, just to get them out of my head onto some paper, or like phone numbers that I need to remember later, you know, whatever. I just write down all this stuff. I write down notes, I write down just little bullet points. But in this moment, I open up my notebook and I start writing. It's more of a journal style at this point that I was writing. I was like, hey, I'm here at the interview. I'm at the school. I'm sitting here. I'm waiting. I'm nervous. I'm feeling this. I'm feeling that. And trying to get my thoughts out of my head so that I could think about them and look at them and try to like coach myself through what I'm feeling, give myself a little pep talk, do a little self-talk, saying, here's what I'm feeling. I'm feeling nervous. I'm afraid. Like, what if I'm not good enough? What if I say the wrong thing? Things like that. And then I'm able to look at that and say, it's okay. You might not have the perfect thing to say. Just be yourself. Remember, be kind, honor everybody, listen to everybody, give people space to express themselves, and just do your best. And probably be slow to speak, quick to listen, and make sure you understand what is being asked, and make sure you've thought about your answer before you actually say it. So I'm sitting there before the admin and the professor who's really leading this thing show up to set up the classroom for the interview. And so they get there, they go to the classroom, and they start setting out, you know, little water bottles and the papers that we are supposed to apparently fill out, which I'll get to that later. They set down pieces of paper at each spot in the at each seat in the classroom, and pens. This is a ballpoint pen. This wasn't a pencil. They were expecting you to be perfect, no mistakes, or at least, you know, you had to do your best. If you wanted to look the best, it would be writing with thought and intentionality, and there wasn't going to be a lot of time for making mistakes and then erasing them. And hopefully, you wouldn't be making mistakes and just scribbling them out. But we'll get to that later. So I walk into the room, I introduce myself, I meet them, I talk to them a little bit, and then I sit down and I look at my journal, look at my little notebook, and I go through it. I flip through it. I might have jotted a couple more things down, but I think I was largely just making conversation with the administrative assistant and the professor, trying to be friendly and personable. I figured that would probably help my chances. Given the situation, I could either just like sit on my phone or sit on my notebook. Not physically. I could flip through my notebook and just like basically keep to myself, or I could introduce myself, get to know them, give them an idea of who I was. I figured that'd be good. So I kept talking to them, asked them questions. What is your position? What do you do here? How long have you been with the school? Things like that. People slowly started filtering in other candidates for this interview. And I had very like little idea of what to expect with this. When I heard that it was a large group screening, a large group interview, I immediately Googled what is a large group interview like? Because I had never been in one. I've only done one on one interviews for jobs. And I think that's it. I don't think I've ever interviewed for anything else really as like an application for something. And so I Googled it and it seemed like it would be either here's a question, what do you all think about it? Or here's a problem. And then as a group, you need to work together to solve it. And so you need to collaborate and listen to others. And then you need to show teamwork skills. And you also need to show leadership skills. So if you take charge, but let other people share their ideas and let them contribute to the solution, making sure everybody's heard, something like that. Or it would be here's a case study about this situation. How would you as a group respond? How would you go about navigating this situation? Something like that. And so I got into this interview. I was just like, I'm going to do my best and I'm going to prepare. Actually, I didn't prepare at all aside from looking up what is a group interview. When I looked up what is a group interview, and the answer was like it could be kind of like these six different scenarios, but they were all so different from each other. I was thinking, what is there to prepare? It could be basically anything within these, and I don't know what to expect. And I don't really have the time to try to predict what it could be and then try to prepare for some situation that might not happen. And so I just thought if I'm well fed, well rested, in a good headspace, low stress, taking care of my responsibilities at work and within life and things like that, just giving myself the best situation, the best circumstance to think quickly and to be kind and compassionate and honoring and all of that, then that's the way that I would have to handle it. And so that's what I tried to do. I got in, made small talk with the administrative assistant and the professor, and then people slowly started filtering in. And I started interacting with some of the other candidates. There were a couple groups of tables. By the time people started sitting next to me or across the table from me, then I started making small talk with them, asking them, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Did you go to undergrad? What's your degree in? I think the vast majority of them had psychology undergrad degrees or social work or what is it? Human development and family systems. I didn't even know that was a thing, but that's what they were saying. So all these degrees that were like inherently related to just like, yeah, you get a psychology degree because you were already thinking about being a therapist, or you were got a social work degree because you were already thinking about that, or you thought you wanted to do something adjacent to therapy. And then there's me. It's like, yeah, I have an undergrad in computer science. I graduated a couple years ago. I've already been working in the world and now I want to do something else. I feel like I was the odd one out. There was one other person who had a data science undergrad degree, but I think she was either just finishing her degree or had just gotten out. Most of these candidates were in their undergrad and they were like, yeah, I'm just finishing up my degree and I know that grad school is the next step. So I'm just going to go straight from undergrad into grad school. A lot of people do that, obviously. I was just different in that I had already been out for a couple of years. I'd already been working in my field and then recognized like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to switch. That made for a lot of fun conversation. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoy just meeting new people in the context of like, we're here sitting down and we can actually get to know each other a little bit, not just like we're at a party making meaningless small talk or I don't know, somewhere like where I can't actually get to know you. That part's not fun to me. So sitting down in a context where we can get to know each other a little bit. And it's kind of a weird dynamic because there's the unspoken thing that like we're competing against one another because there are only so many spots in this program. They're only going to admit so many of us. They can't accept all of us. And I think this is a rough estimation, but I think there were maybe about 25 candidates in the room and then another 5 or so online that did actually join via Zoom. And so I'm having these conversations with people, like trying to be really nice and cordial and just trying to show that you're personable and friendly while also being aware of the fact that I might get in and you might not, or you might get in and I might not, or maybe we both get in, or maybe we both don't get in. But like right now, it's almost like me against you in a sense. There's a little bit of that at least. It's a strange dynamic, and maybe you've been there before. If you've been in like I have only ever seen this in a movie, so I don't know if this actually exists. But like what comes to mind is like a casting call. There's a movie about an actor or an actress and they're at the auditions. And so there's like this one room, the waiting room, where you got like 20 people all looking at their scripts. And then they call people in one by one. And it's like one of those scenarios where you get to see who you're competing against for this one position. I've only ever seen that happen in the movies. I don't even know if that exists in real life. It must have at one point, and it probably still does in some industries. But I've never seen that because most of our interviews are online these days. So you can just like, hey, let's set up a Zoom call or let's set up a phone call and let's talk. But yeah, interesting dynamic, one that I had never been in before. So the way the day went is that when it was time to start, then the professor that was already in the room, the one that I had been talking about earlier, she introduced herself. She said, here's what the program is, here's what it's like. She walked through a description of what the program was about, how long it would take, the kinds of things that you can expect, and what the program was geared toward preparing you for, what kind of role, what kind of job. She talked about here are the professors, here are their specialties, here's where they're from, things like that. And some like upcoming, here's some exciting upcoming events. Like I'm pretty sure one of them was like, hey, the counseling department is going to be moving to a new building either next semester or the semester after that. And so it's currently being renovated, but we're going to expect a new space very soon. So like that's really exciting. As like a potential candidate, you think, wow, I could be in a new space. That's really cool. So she shared a lot about that kind of thing. And then she broke us into groups. And so there's one group that was staying in the room that we started. And then there was the other half of the group. So like out of the roughly 25 people that were there, they were split in half. And so my half got to stay in the room that we were in. And then the other half went to a different classroom. In my group, there were 10 of us, including myself. Oh, and then the people that were on Zoom were in their own group. And so there was another like faculty member that was already attending via Zoom, and so I think they were moderating that group. So there were 10 of us in my group, and we all moved to one table. We brought up as many chairs and rearranged the tables as we needed to. The way they explained it to us was, we're going to ask you some questions, and you can answer as many or as few as you would like. We're going to give space for everybody to answer. And when it becomes apparent that everybody has answered who wants to answer, then we're going to move on and ask the next question. And this is just a way for us to get to know you and for us to hear how you would handle some of these situations we're going to ask about. And you can ask each other follow-up questions to an answer. We encourage the discussion. Obviously, if things run too long, then we're going to at some point cut it off and just move on. But we would just like to get to know you. And so we had 2 professors who were asking us questions and moderating this group. Oh, I can't remember all the questions, but the first quote unquote question was just introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and what you plan on studying. So this program, this interview, was both for mental health counseling and school counseling, so like student affairs. Then within that, you had your different specializations, or at least you had your specializations within mental health counseling, so marriage and family, or like play therapy, or there were 2 others that I can't remember right now, and then school counseling. And so we had a pretty even split. It might have been like a 60-40 split between school counselors and mental health counselors. And I think I was one of 2 marriage and family therapy specialization candidates within that room. So there might have been more in the other group or online. I think there were only 2 of us that were thinking about marriage and family therapy. And so that made the questions pretty interesting because the questions are not equally applicable to everybody because everybody had a different demographic that they were hoping to help someday. And so the questions, I can't even remember correctly, but I remember one of them was like, we all go through hard things. Tell us about a time that you went through a hard thing and how you handled it and how you overcame your challenges. And then another question was like, who is somebody in real life or in a like maybe it's a movie character or a TV show character, somebody who represents the kind of person that you admire and then why. And so maybe that's like a mentor or a coach or a boss, or maybe it's like, I really admire this hero in this story because of their bravery, because of their care for the people around them. Or I really admire this mom in this TV show because of the way that she kept everybody together and that she really, like, she sacrificed her own needs for the well being of others and put everybody else first. Something like that. So on the question about like we all go through hard things, explain a time, describe a time that you went through a hard thing and how you overcame it. I talked about my stroke. And so, hey everybody, welcome to my life. I haven't mentioned this. Obviously, this is only the second episode. So I had a stroke in November of 2023, not even 1 month into my marriage. My wife and I were newlyweds, and we celebrated our 1 month anniversary in my hospital room. And that was a tough experience. Definitely the hardest thing I had ever gone through, the stroke recovery, the like having the stroke, that wasn't hard. But recovering and not even in the hospital. I mean, I really just in the hospital, I like laid there. I took the medications I was supposed to. I tried to mind my manners and pass the tests that the doctors and the physician's assistants came in and asked me about. But once I got home and I started grappling with real life again, with my work, with just doing things around the apartment, um, that was at the time, yeah, the hardest thing I had gone through. And so I explained, yeah, a couple months ago, I had a stroke. It was a really scary time. And once I got home and I was recovering, it just felt like for a little while. And I think at the time of the interview, I still hadn't gotten my full brain capacity back. Maybe I had. Actually, yeah, I probably had. It was at that point, it was like 5 months ago, 4 months ago, April, March, February, January, December, November. Okay, so 5 months ago. So like 5 months ago, I had a stroke, and there was a period. Oh yeah, I was definitely doing a lot better by this point. So I said, in the last 6 months or so, I feel like I have been in a period of going through the hardest thing in my life, followed by the next new hardest thing that I've ever had to go through, followed by another thing that has been the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And that started with my stroke and the recovery that came from that, and wrestling with like, I don't think the way I used to. I don't process things the way I used to. It feels like I'm definitely different and I'm just not myself. I'm not the person I recognize usually. And I didn't really dive into too many details because I don't know, it's not, I just went through life and I kept praying for recovery and talking with friends and coworkers, going to therapy. And by that, I mean mental health therapy. Like I saw a counselor, not like a physical therapist. So going to therapy, processing things. And I just kept improving, thank God. And so I talked about that, and gosh, that's like, I don't even think like I don't know. I think I talked about I have a great support system. I have a very supportive wife who loves me and cares for me, and he gives me grace when I'm not doing things the way I used to, when I forget things, when I stumble physically or, metaphorically. And then I've got friends who I can talk to and be honest with and tell them, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'm struggling with, here's the ways that I am not the way I used to be. Here's what I am missing, here's what I'm lacking. Then of course I had my faith, my Christian faith to fall back on as well, for that to hold me up. And I can't exactly remember everything I said, but I know I ended with, and I'm finally at a point where I can say, God, I know you had a plan. I knew as I was recovering, I knew you had a plan and I knew this was for my good, but I didn't see it. And I still don't really see it entirely, I'm sure, but I see little bits and pieces here and there. And I'm at a point where I can finally say, God, thank you for the stroke because it taught me things and it changed the way I thought about things in a way that I had been praying for. So, for example, I had been thinking about I want to do a better job of connecting conversational tangents. Maybe I'll be in a conversation with somebody and then I go off on a tangent and then I'm like, wait a minute, how did we get here? What were we talking about before? And I just really struggled with that. And so I was thinking, God, I'd really like to do a better job of that. That's the next thing I want to work on. And so with the stroke, I had to learn how to be more intentional and focus in on what were we talking about and where is the tangent going, and then I can follow the tangent to its conclusive end and then jump back on the trail that we were originally walking. And so fortunately I got better at that because I had to give more thought to it. So I said, thank you, God, for this because you answered my prayer. I'd been praying for that. It wasn't the way that I thought you would answer this. I wouldn't have chosen this, but we got there. And then the most important thing, the more important of the two things that come to mind about the good, the blessings in disguise from the stroke, were that my self talk really improved, especially after the stroke. I'll give you an example. So I would be in the kitchen making coffee, and then maybe I would spill a little bit on the countertop. Before the stroke, I would say, like, what are you doing? You idiot. Come on. Why do you have to spill? Just do better. And just like really being my own worst critic. I am my own worst critic. I have high standards for myself, and I criticize myself when I fall short of those because I know I can do better. I know I can meet the standards that I set. And when I don't, then it's like, why not? I just have a hard time with that. But then after the stroke, there were a couple times where I spilled things and I just had to laugh and say, all right, I'm going to give myself grace because I don't do things the way I used to. I'm not as coordinated as I used to be. I'm going to have to relearn some things. My self talk changed from, what are you doing, you idiot? Or why would you do that? You're stupid, into isolating the person I was from the behavior that I was displaying. And I would say, you silly goose, because it's just silly behavior. I'm going to say silly because it's not necessarily stupid. It's not necessarily blatantly foolish. It's just like, oh, made a mistake. Oops, it happens. We all do that. You silly goose. We all have our silly goose moments. And so I learned to say, you silly goose, that's okay. Let's clean it up and let's just keep going with what we were doing because we're going to have to relearn some of these things. And that really changed my life for the better. When I made that connection, I was able to say, thank you, God, for this stroke because you had good in mind for it. And maybe you didn't cause it. That's not really important. But what I thought would be bad or what most people would see as bad, you used for good. And so thank you so much. So I was able to explain that. And then the next thing that stands out to me about the interview is that in that same question about naming a hard time that you went through and how you overcame it, the person sitting across from me, they said that they experienced quite a bit of transphobia and homophobia from friends and family members and people around them when they came out as gay. And then they changed their name as well, something more reflective of their identity from their old name. I only knew this person by their new name that they went by. And they explained the situation. They explained the hurt that they went through, the hurt that they experienced. And I said, hey, can I ask a follow-up question? Do you mind if I ask what your previous name was? And they said, oh, I don't share that information, but I really appreciate you asking. Do you mind? Are you comfortable sharing that? And I said, yeah, that's understandable. No worries. Follow-up question to that. Why did you pick your new name? What was it about your new name that made you look at yourself and say, yes, this identifies me more than my old name did? And they said, well, it stemmed from a gamer tag that I had when I was playing video games with my friends. And pretty soon people just started calling me by like my gamer tag. And then I decided to adopt it or part of it or a version of it as my new name. And I said, that makes total sense that you would have this identity within a community where you were loved and accepted and welcomed and known. And then you took that name and that's how you present yourself to the world. And that's such a beautiful thing. I'm so glad that you had that community that was able to surround you like that. So that's an example of how we were asking follow-up questions of one another. And then on the question about like name a character, name a person in your life who has inspired you or that you admire. Maybe this was a different question, but maybe it was wrapped up in the same question. Was we all have mottos, we all have phrases that we carry with us through life. What is one of yours? And I said one of the phrases that has stuck with me through life is from Andy Stanley. He's a pastor down in Atlanta, Georgia. He has a network of churches. I actually attended one of his churches while I lived in Atlanta for a little while. He has this saying that goes, "A relationship with Jesus will make your life better and will make you better at life." And so I shared that and I said, this phrase has stuck with me because as a Christian, I recognize this to be true, that when I am left to my own devices, then I live a life that is empty and full of hurt and full of pain, and I hurt others. I'm like one of the worst versions of myself. But when I have Jesus as part of my life, then I am one of the best versions of myself, that I actually start looking like him instead of looking like myself. And that's to say, like, I'm patient, I'm kind, I'm caring, I'm loving. So that's the way in which I've seen it true, that a relationship with Jesus will make your life better. And it makes you better at life because you are able to weather the storms that life throws at all of us because you have a firm foundation on which you can stand. Jesus and God, they never change. If you're a Christian and you believe that the Bible is true, then we are assured that. We are assured that God is the same today, tomorrow, yesterday. He's been the same all throughout history, and he never changes. And he always loves us, and he always cares for us, and he's always working for our good. And so we can stand on that and know that that's true and believe that that is true. And because we also know that he is working everything in life for our benefit, for the good, even though we can debate what good looks like from situation to situation, we don't have to hold everything on our shoulders because we know that there is a God who is big enough to hold everything on his shoulders and to give us what we need in its due time and give us the peace and the comfort that we need when the trials of life come, and who's going to walk through everything with us. It doesn't necessarily make you a better person. You're not better than the person next to you, but it makes you more capable at handling the troubles that life gives you. If you picture you become better at a sport or better at a game, like if you want to make it a metaphor, you become better at playing this game that we call life. You become better at walking through it. And so I think that's true. And that's what I shared. So that's about all I remember of the questions, but it was really chill. It was actually very low key, more than I thought it would be. It was basically the professors asked these questions and then everybody had the chance to respond. It was kind of like a one-on-one interview, but just the questions were asked open forum style where everybody can answer. That kind of interview, I love that kind of thing. And this kind of interview, knowing that I had no idea what to expect, it would potentially be completely different than anything I had ever experienced. When it turned out to be just, here's a question, feel free to give us an answer, then that was like, whoa, I can do this. I've done this before. I just got to make sure that I answer at the right time and don't talk over anybody else. Then, after all the questions had been asked, then the two professors explained next steps and, like, here's what you can expect. If you want to go on a campus tour, then there's going to be this person waiting for you. Otherwise, the graduate assistantship fair, the interviews will be over at this place at this time. Feel free to grab lunch in between now and then. Before we leave, those papers that were at each person's seat when you came in, there's a writing prompt on there. We would like you to answer that question, and you can just leave it on the desk. You could leave it face up, face down, whatever, and then we will collect those later. And so it was a writing prompt that asked, if you were to be accepted into this program, what do you think your greatest challenge would be? And so I wrote that my greatest challenge, and I filled up probably like 4/5 of the page, 3/4 of the page or so. And I have like pretty small handwriting. So I wrote quite a bit. It was kind of like taking the ACT and having the writing portion of that. And so I answered that the toughest part about being in this program would be commuting and balancing my relationship with my wife, which is obviously my most important priority. That is number one. If I don't have a healthy marriage, then I have nothing. Or I should say, a healthy relationship with God. That's kind of implied as number zero, if you want to think about it like that. But here, as far as my human, worldly obligations to friends and family and things like that, to my job, to school, all that stuff, like taking care of my wife and making sure that her needs are met and that we are communicating and that I am listening to what she's feeling and what she's thinking. And like we're just talking about life and doing life together. That is number one. And so knowing that I would spend a lot of time, if I was to get accepted into the school, it was in person. So I would have to be commuting to the school from our apartment or wherever we were living. And then I would have to spend time in class and then at home doing homework. And if I got a graduate assistantship, then I would be spending time at school, more time than just for classes. I'd spend more time at school working. And that's just a lot of time away from each other. So currently we work at the same place. We don't work next to each other, and we don't usually, or at this point, we don't always carpool to work together because we have differing schedules afterward or during the lunch break or whatever. We generally see each other quite a bit, which is really nice. We actually like to see each other still because we're newlyweds. Ha. Anyway, so we work at the same place and we don't work right next to each other, but we still get to see each other quite a bit so that when we are not at home together, then we at least get to see each other during work. We can take lunch breaks together if we want. We get to go on walks and take little 5-10 minute breaks from work if we want. She stops by my desk, I stop by her desk, and we talk. Hey, what do you think for supper tonight? And what do you got going on? You plan on leaving at the normal time? Are you going to stay late? Are you going to leave early? Whatever. So being at school, going to school, taking classes, driving every day, then working at school, and the time that it would take away from our marriage and from the other activities that we were in, I knew that would be a lot. And so I said, my wife is priority number one. And I know that this program will also require a lot of time. And I want to honor both this program and the schooling that I am applying for. But I also need to take care of my family and make sure that I am providing for our needs to the best of my ability and providing for her emotional needs and listening to her share how her day went and giving space for us to actually talk and get to know each other and talk about things when life comes up, when life happens. And so I answered this question saying the hardest thing for me will be balancing schoolwork with my marriage and my other relationships with friends and family, because relationships are super important to me. You know, if you've heard anything from Dave Ramsey or Dr. John Deloney, he's one of the Ramsey personalities, dealing more on the mental health side than the money side, like Dave is. But he likes to say that relationships are your emergency fund for life. That when life happens, when things come crashing down and the wheels fall off, if you have a good community, if you have a good support system with the people that you love and that know you and that care about you, then that's your emergency fund for those situations when life happens. And so, yeah, that's what I wrote about. I left it on the table. I went on a campus tour because, again, I showed up and I had never been on this campus before. And I thought, hey, if I'm going to be a student here, I might as well look at the place, get to know it a little bit, see what there is that it offers. So went on a tour with one other candidate and 3 student ambassadors because they didn't know how big the tour group might be. Or actually, there were 2 of the student ambassadors stayed and gave the tour, and then it was us 2 candidates that stayed and, were part of the tour. And then that 3rd student ambassador went off and did some other administrative work, I think. So the 4 of us walked around campus and we walked through like the student union and the library and the wellness center. We looked at the indoor track and the weight room and the basketball courts. And we walked past not the food court, but they have like Chick-fil-A on campus. They have some other like Asian or maybe burrito place. I can't remember which one it is. They've got a smoothie place. So we walked past all of that, walked past the bookstore, and that was fun. Talk to each other. Like, what do you plan on studying? Like, me to the other candidate. Hey, what degree did you want? What specialization did you want? What made you want to get into this? Why this school compared to the other ones? And then us to the student ambassadors. It's like, how'd you hear about this program? How long have you been a student ambassador? How long have you been a student here? What's your favorite thing about this school? What's your least favorite thing about this school? Making some good conversation. And then at the end of the day, I was given a little coupon for a free scoop of ice cream at their ice cream parlor place. So I got to go grab a scoop of ice cream by myself. I sat down, enjoyed the ice cream. It was really good, and got to just say, God, thank you for how well this day has gone. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for all the questions going smoothly. I think I answered all of their questions. I think they asked about 5 of them, or maybe 6. And just thank you for this opportunity. Whatever happens, thank you. I know that you were with me and that the doors that open will be opened because you want them open, and the doors that are closed will be because you want them closed. And so I know you're going to direct me where I need to go. And so then I went home and actually, wait, I grabbed my laptop and found a spot on campus to keep working, to do some work because I still had work to do and I was able to work remotely from campus. So I did some more work the rest of the afternoon until about 5:30 ish rolled around, and then I drove home. So that was my application process. That was the application experience, the interview day. So now what you're probably wondering is, did I even get into the program? Of course, you're not wondering that because you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if I hadn't gotten into the program. That's what this whole podcast is about. So that day, the interview day was April 18th, and then April 25th. So exactly 1 week later, I got another email saying, "Thank you for participating in our group screening on Thursday, April 18th. Congratulations, you've been accepted to our program beginning the fall semester of 2024, contingent upon providing another letter of recommendation and a background check." So what had happened, and this is kind of funny, and I'm glad that everything ended up working out. But apparently, for a counseling program, a letter of recommendation from your personal counselor, the person who knows you and knows what it takes to be a successful counselor, apparently that letter of recommendation is not acceptable. And I just find that funny. I mean, there's understanding for like, hey, this is probably a conflict of interest. Somebody who is going to be inherently biased toward you is not an acceptable source. So I get that. If that's the reason that they couldn't accept that letter, then I understand. But I do think it's a little funny that my counselor knows me pretty well and also understands what it takes to be a successful counselor and what counseling looks like, and has said Jason would make a good counselor. They say that's not acceptable. So a little ironic. But fortunately, I was able to reach out to one of my former professors and asked him for a letter of recommendation, and he was able to provide one within a couple days. And so we got that new letter of recommendation. I went through the background check. So I got into the program, and it's awesome. It's crazy. It's wonderful. It is just from the day, April 1st, from the day I applied, which was the day of deadline, until the whole thing. I mean, still now, but all throughout the whole application process where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just here to do my best. I'm just going to show up and share my heart for people. The whole thing was just God opening doors that I could never open on my own. And I think that is really cool. It's just been a wild ride, and I am so excited for to start it, to actually like jump into classes. It's just going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be cool forming these new relationships with people as we go through this program together as a group. And I am so grateful for my wife for being so supportive as she was, for helping me with my personal statement, with my application, for making me sound the best that I could, and to be genuine, and for people to see my heart for others through the application materials that I submitted. And that comes through good editing. And I thank her for that. And I thank her just in general for her support and for believing in me, for my friends and family believing in me and encouraging me to follow this passion of mine. And I thank God for opening the doors that only He could open in order to get me to this point, because without Him and without my friends and family, none of this would be happening. I'm going to end it on a sappy note there, saying thank you, everybody. You know who you are. All of my best friends who have had these conversations with me about where my heart is and where my passions lie and what I might be good at and what I should pursue as a career. I appreciate you guys, and for all of the mentors and my parents and my wife, of course, and my career coach and my counselor who have pointed me in the direction that I am headed in and helped me refine what it is that I care about. Thank you guys so much. And thank you, listener, for being a listener and just being interested in this wacky story that I had to share. To all of my friends and mentors, I want to say thank you. And to you, listener, I want to say, don't do drugs, stay in school. Love you.